This is a Strategist episode 1875. My name is Zain Velji. With me, as always, Shannon Phillips and Stephen Carter. Carter, how are you, sir?
My God. Oh, my God. Oh, my God. Jugmeet Singh, Drake, and Lamar. Kendrick. Holy shit.
Almost got it. Okay, I'm going to give you a second take. Go ahead. Try again.
Fuck. What did I get wrong?
No, Lamar Kendrick. Kendrick Lamar.
Kendrick Lamar. Fuck. Kendrick Lamar. Drake.
You know someone who
Jugmeet Singh.
Not have fucked that up.
Holy shit.
Shannon Phillips. Shannon Phillips would not have fucked that up.
You know what?
Did you read your
She doesn't
briefing
even
books?
care.
I did not receive the briefing note. I would have read it with excitement and relish. I did not enjoy the one tweet I had to read on this. However, if there was an actual briefing note on it, that would have been more exciting to read to kind of really get into the background.
Let me give you the briefing note. These are two fragile men.
Yes.
And then there's Kendrick Lamar. Okay, that's what's happened. There is Drake, and there's Jagmeet Singh, who folded so much quicker than I thought he would. It was embarrassing by Jagmeet Singh. I do love Jagmeet, but Shannon, welcome. I'm part of the Jagmeet Singh fan club. Carter is well known to this, that I'm probably Jagmeet Singh's last fan.
This is just another reason why the man shouldn't be in politics.
But this was a fucking dumbass move by Jagmeet Singh. I do not know what the hell he was thinking.
To go to a concert?
You can
go to a fucking concert.
I agree with you completely.
Go to the concert.
I agree
Stand
with
up.
you.
Be strong. Don't apologize. Say, I like the fucking music. Go to hell, Drake. Or ignore it. Because who the fuck cares?
Carter's correct.
I agree. He can go wherever he wants. And I don't think he has to answer to anyone, especially now that he's a private citizen. There were other private citizens there. Like, get over yourself, Drake.
Get over yourself,
Here's what's
Jagmeet.
interesting. Yeah, so there is something interesting about this, which is Jagmeet Singh's cultural cachet was always greater than his political sort of upside, Carter.
Gravitas?
Yeah, like the fact that like Drake and Jagmeet Singh know one another is actually quite interesting from a Canadian cultural perspective. I find that to be quite interesting. So what does someone like Jagmeet Singh have to do when he obviously is no longer a political face, but transitioned? I'm almost asking you celebrity PR, Carter, but it kind of is.
Oh, yeah.
Because Jagmeet Singh almost is on like a celebrity PR track now, isn't he?
No, he's at the
Or
very
like
end of
whatever
his celebrity
Canadian
PR
version of
track. Yeah,
Yeah,
he's
I
at the
knew you were
very
gonna say
end of
that,
his
literally.
his celebrity track, and he extended it by an extra 24 hours just by getting in the middle of this Kendrick Lamar Drake. Why don't we just all go with Kendrick? I mean, and what is ZA? What is that? Is that a band?
Carter.
Oh,
Okay.
okay. It hurts. But if Jagmeet Singh is going to have another little round of 15 minutes of fame, then he should use it for fundraising purposes to clean up the debt that he left the party and the existential threat that he left to the federal NDP and the future of social democracy in this country. How about we take that seriously, not the Kendrick Drake feud? Like, come on down to earth, buddy. There's a big old debt there. Figure it out and set the party up for success, which is something you never did in the time that you were leader of it.
Here's what I like. I like that Shannon has taken it in this direction. I was just coming in with a nice sort of like, let's all lay our tentacles into Jagmeet Singh for a few minutes. But now I have a serious question for you. And it's back to you, Shannon. Does the former leader have a actual responsibility to clear this debt? Like, how? And talk to me from like a party perspective. Because many people do not know this, and you could probably explain it greater than I am, but I'll give you the simplified version. The NDP have a building that they borrow against to raise money.
That's right.
So, and I think they're the only political party on the federal scene that does so and does that, the borrowing of the money leverage against the building. So this is an interesting sort of situation where what happens when a leader leaves? What have you historically seen? What do you think both the actual and moral responsibility for someone like Jagmeet Singh is in that regard?
Well, the federal party's never been left in a state like this, not even when they lost party status in 1993, to my recollection of it, although I joined the party in around 97. But I was on the federal council in the late 90s, early 2000s, and, in the days when we had like 20 seats, so I saw their finances at that time. And I was around as well for when the party bought, or essentially Labor bought the building for the party before the new election finance rules came into place that that Chrétien brought in, right, in 2003, before the 2004 election. So that was the genesis of that. Steele and others pooled some, because they, in the olden times, Labor used to guarantee that loan, right, in some way, shape, or form, because they could.
Oh, I wasn't aware of that. Oh, that's
Yeah.
interesting.
And so when the legislation took that out, then Labor, before the legislation came in, Labor bought the building.
Yeah.
And then the party, and that was essentially what, there were a couple of different things that came out of that legislation that helped the party build in the latent years. Number one was it allowed individual riding associations to do their own receipting and their own fundraising. And so you didn't have to necessarily do a revenue share or anything. So you were just amassing money in individual riding. So a Nathan Cullen, a Jack Layton, and Olivia Chow, these kinds of seats, then, Brian Massey grew up over time, right? Because they could establish their own fundraising base. So that was what that legislation did for the party. And the other thing it did was allowed them to borrow. But to your question, what responsibility does Jagmeet Singh have? I'm not really sure if I can sort of reach back to a history time on when a leader had that kind of responsibility, because no leader has left the party in this kind of dire straits ever. So if he has an ability to help them get out of it, he should try, because he's set a really bad precedent here, and he has authored a lot of it.
Carter obviously was not planning to go here, but now I find this a very interesting line of inquiry. As
Great.
someone
I'm
who's
well prepared
advised
for
politicians, and as a political practitioner, what responsibility would you have tasked with your principal, Jagmeet Singh, to clear the party's debt? Or would you have said you do your nominal bit? Do you participate at all? This is behind you. You're done. How do you even think about these things? We often talk about leadership campaigns, which are, of course, associated with your name, and you ran for leadership, and we talked about the toxicity of leadership debts. This is interesting because it's a party that no longer has official party status, that has this ability to borrow, that did do that borrowing. It's got a long history and tenure. It's a very interesting situation. What responsibility do you hold Jagmeet Singh to as from a practical practitioner's perspective?
I think he's got a moral responsibility that he's going to be walking away from. I mean, he has no actual responsibility. He has a moral responsibility, but that moral responsibility does not carry the weight of law or any of the truth of the matter is the leader's not responsible for the actual actions of the party during the actual campaign. One could argue he may not even have known. Now, if he didn't know, then I think he'd be delinquent in his leadership responsibilities. But if he did know, then, he would have some fundraising responsibilities. But let's be honest, Zain, if he had any capacity to do the fundraising, he would have raised the funds. He doesn't have the ability to do the fundraising. So he leaves a giant hole for whoever chooses or is chosen to lead that party. I'm not sure you're going to see a huge lineup of people going, yeah, I really want this challenge. But whoever takes it on is going to be taking on quite a lift.
Can I talk about Jagmeet for a second, though? Shannon, maybe over to you. Do you feel like someone who leaves a party in this sort of lurch, has this impact them in their future career prospects or even in a brand way? Or have we in politics just consider this one of the elements of politics where this doesn't dog you? You get to just move on with your life. What do you think?
Oh, I mean, I think it would depend on what he wants to do. But generally speaking, my working thesis is always that people don't really understand politics. And to the extent they do, they don't really care how it all works. And so he'll probably go off into the private sector or go and practice law or do something else. I think, I'm sure he's got a number of things that he can do. He is a talented guy in certain respects. He just wasn't particularly talented at leading the federal NDP and creating one party, in my view, for the country. So he'll do that. I don't think it really matters. But for people like me who would like a relevant federal NDP, who, my heart has broken for the last decade watching what has gone on with the federal NDP. And now with the opportunities and openings that they have that they won't be able to necessarily take. Am I pissed about it? Hell yeah, I am. It's a good thing I can't hire him because I wouldn't.
Carter, let's use that transition of heartbreaks, and let's go from heartbreaks for the last decade to hearts potentially breaking for Conservatives in January, because it has just come out a couple hours ago that Pierre Poilievre is going to be facing a leadership review at the party's, and these are sources speaking to the Globe and Mail, at the party's national convention in January of 2026. Carter, this was well rumored to be something that happens in the spring, potentially for Pierre Poilievre. It's now been moved up to January. This is also a time where Pierre Poilievre doesn't have a seat. It's also a time where Pierre Poilievre seems to be, at least reported by the Hill Times, making phone calls to do a campaign debrief post-mortem. Start here. Does this help or hinder Pierre Poilievre's chances to stay on as leader? The timeline moving up to January. Start here with me.
I was thinking about that, and I actually don't think I know the answer. I think that there is a case to be made that giving a little bit more time for him to, like he's dropped precipitously in the polls, having a little bit more time for him to show his legs, and to actually achieve something might be better for him. On the other hand, January, I'm not 100% certain, but I believe it's those in the room who get the vote on the leadership review. Maybe not everybody wants to travel in January. Maybe it's a smaller crew. Maybe it becomes the diehards who want to see him stay. He may be able to influence that more effectively. I think it's a bit of a push. I think, frankly, if you're going to face these leadership reviews after every election, and I'm not sure I'm a fan, I'm not sure that this is the best way to run a party, but this is the way we've all chosen to run a party at this stage. If you're going to have the leadership review, personally, I think the faster after the election, the better for the party, just to get it behind them. But I worry for young Pierre. I worry that he's facing off against something that he may not be able to control.
I'm glad you mentioned earlier, because that's where my instinct would be at. He seemed to be riding a pretty decent wave on the heels of the election to kind of say, listen, we didn't get there, but we got really fucking close. The narrative was on his side that he didn't fully tank this thing, especially considering where they were going to be with the majority government that was going to be piled against him. And so I agree with the sentiment of close, but now we're in this weird period. It's not a year from now or like March, which I'll use that as roughly like a year from now, right? Like 9 months from now. But it's January, and it's January, Shannon. So I'm like, there's also something to be said. January, like a beginning of a new year, people looking for renewal, people potentially thinking about things maybe slightly differently. It's cold as fuck in Calgary. So I'm kind of curious, where is your head at? If you're Pierre Poilievre, now that you've had this date moved up on you by a couple of months.
January in Calgary, importantly.
Yeah,
right. So you can, you have a good opportunity to fill that room full of people who are going to vote nicely for you, who maybe just worked on the campaign, on the by-election, who are your ride or dies out of Alberta. They're not folks out of BC who might be butthurt that they didn't have the breakthrough that they wanted. They're not going to be folks from Atlantic Canada who are butthurt that they didn't have the breakthrough that was expected, back even 5 months ago. And so I think it's easier for them to do it earlier. It basically means that you campaign through the summer, through your by-election and through your barbecue circuit. You get back into the house, you score a few points off the budget and other things, and show that you still are in fighting form. It's not long enough for anything to fester, either on the party side or the caucus side. As I said last time, when looking at his really crappy numbers, and they are really bad. There's been a couple of data sets come out now, and they're
beyond
they're
nano
not,
since the last time we chatted. Yeah, there have been.
They're not good. Ain't good over there. Now, caucus is probably going to be the last people to cotton on to this, right? Caucuses being what they are, oftentimes they're the last people. You could hold a gun to their head and they wouldn't be able to tell you what percentage of popular vote you got in the last election. This is what electeds are like. Having been one, I know how blissfully unaware they are. But I do think that it doesn't give anything time to steamroll and to fester, because the party is still on his side. They kind of still don't know what to do or make of it. And it won't be enough time for factions to kind of bubble up in caucus. I think that's probably the idea of January over spring.
Carter, what do you think of that?
Calgary.
What do you think of that? I agree with the Calgary part. I'm not sure I entirely buy that there's not enough time for allowing something to fester, or for an alternative, even if not perfect or even as good enough as Pierre Poilievre, to present itself. Do you agree with Shannon, or do you feel like there is a bit of daylight here if someone wanted to do shit?
Shannon's the typical NDPer, sees, wants to keep a leader forever. The Conservative Party does the exact opposite. They want to get rid of their leaders as fast as humanly possible. There's always someone campaigning for it. The idea that Doug Ford isn't going to be in a position to send a whole bunch of people to Calgary with his voting preferences, it doesn't matter necessarily.
Or let me throw another name out there: Jason Kenney.
Jason Kenney.
The Jason Kenney. These things could all happen. I mean, we're not sure. I'm not sure that any location would have been good. I'm not sure that any time would be good, because I think that unlike the New Democrats, who have long had this, let's give our party leaders a couple, 3, 4 chances at the grabbing the brass ring, the Conservative Party is one and done. That is their methodology. That's the way that they think. And I don't think that Pierre Poilievre's performance, as good as it was, is going to necessarily be enough to stand in the face of the performance as bad as it potentially could be. And because it is equally as bad, it's not great for the good folks, in Pierre Poilievre's camp. This is just, I just don't know that he's going to be able to rebound through the fall. And my bet would always be on the Conservatives tossing their leader. It's the same way that I think if Jugmeet Singh didn't resign, I'm not sure the NDP get rid of him, because they just are so politically inept. Not you, Shannon, but the others.
Well, a lot of people just walked away from the federal party, but this is where, on the Poilievre thing, I mean, the reason why I sort of tend towards he might be okay and he might be able to skate it through if he doesn't let it fester too long is because you have seen the Conservative Party successfully peddle the narrative, and maybe it's a fiction, I don't know, that they actually kind of won the last campaign.
And arguably they've done that well enough to
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. I mean, and so to Carter's point, it's true that they do like to stab each other in the back, the front, everywhere else. But it would seem to me that they've got that. He's still got the membership, right? At least for now, because he catered to the ones that might be the fastest to throw him overboard, the kind of like the further right ones, right? The more conspiratorial ones.
Yeah.
He never really pissed them off, right? He never went, like, oh, you're a globalist WEF guy or whatever. They never got really the chance to throw him overboard on that stuff, or even vaccine or whatever else might have come up. So, and he didn't even piss them off on Trump, which arguably might have bought him some points on the other side.
Fair.
So it would seem to me that he's still got them. They're not very mobilizable against him in Calgary, not yet, unless somebody comes from the right at him, which could happen.
I'm glad you mentioned this, because I almost want to put you guys on two separate teams. Carter, your team create fucking chaos for Pierre. That's what I want you to be for a second. And Shannon,
okay,
I want you to be on team secure Pierre's future, right? So as a former elected, I want you to think about what you would do over the course of this summer. This is dovetailing off the reporting by the Hill Times that's saying Pierre Poilievre's doing one-on-one calls with former candidates, caucus members, being like, where did we go wrong? What's going on? What do you think? But I want to start with Carter on this. Carter, if your job was to sow chaos and potentially propose an alternative between now and two milestones that we know, we roughly know, his by-election and now January, give me a game plan, roughly, around what you'd be doing. What you'd be doing this summer, what you'd be doing tail end of summer, what you'd be doing early fall right now, Carter, if you wanted to propose the weakening of Pierre Poilievre and potentially an alternative. Then I'll come to you, Shannon.
Number one is setting the expectations for the by-election, right? I can't remember what the vote percentages were in Battle River, Crowfoot, or what is the name of the riding? Battle River, something like that.
Safest one. It's something like an 80-20 split. I'll look it up.
82, I think.
Yeah. So it's got to be, he's got to get over 80%, right? Like in a by-election, that should be the minimum that he is achieving. I would set that as a primary outcome. If he's going to show real strength, he has to get over 80%. If he doesn't get over 80%, then we are seeing the law, he's not as popular. So that would be the first thing I would set. The second thing I would set is that he's got to perform well on the barbecue circuit. And this is not a guy who traditionally performs well on the barbecue circuit. He is better in the House of Commons doing the theatrical than he is in the in people's front rooms doing the barbecue circuit, meeting the Gen Pop. That's not his strength, but I would set an expectation that it's going to have to be his strength. How does he perform at the Stampede? How does he perform across Canada during the course of the summer? Is he getting out there? Is he being seen? Or is he, retreating into prep for House of Commons, which is what he really loves and what he really wants to be? I'd set those two expectations right off the bat. And the third expectation I would set is that his House of Commons performance is just costed in. We know he's going to be great. He's going to be the best leader possible in the House of Commons. Unfortunately, that doesn't win elections. Tom Mulcair performed wonderfully in the House of Commons. And look where he is today. Punditry on radio stations. Poor Tom. Poor little Tommy.
Carter, before I go to Shannon on this, in terms of helping Pierre save his leadership, how would you do this? You said you'd set these marks in the sand. You'd set these lines. Would it be as a separate group? How would you suggest these things become socialized and then become markers that we all being the very small niche political class, follow and say, yes, box checked, box not checked? How do you ensure that these things become socially validated KPIs that we're all like, okay, like I see there's a there. How do you do that?
Unnamed conservative insiders who look like they are pro-Poilievre rather than anti-Poilievre. So they'd come out and say...
Leaked to the media.
Yeah, they'd leak it to the media and say, you know what, Pierre Poilievre's going to get 85% in Battle River. There is no way that he's not going to perform to 85%. His ability to win in Alberta is unparalleled. He's going to do an amazing job. Not only that, he's going to work the entire barbecue circuit. He has to work the entire barbecue circuit. He's going to do a great job on that. I just would just set high expectations for him that I know he can't meet by making it look like I'm on his side.
It's almost like you've done this before, Carter.
I might have. There's no evidence.
Shannon, what does he need to do? What does he need to do this summer? He's making these individualized phone calls. Is that sufficient? Is that even a good start? Is that even a good move for Pierre Poilievre as he tries to get a seat back, I should be clear, and save his leadership now with a timeline of January?
Oh, 100%. It's a good move. Everybody likes to be asked for their advice and what they think, especially, after an election outcome. I think for sure that's a good idea. And I think he should be focusing on places that generally have a large and active membership and tend to send people to these review exercises. So obviously the Alberta members who have lots of membership in their ridings, I'd be talking to them in particular. And I'd probably, in addition to my Stampede work, I would be doing some specific things with the biggest Alberta ridings where there's a large membership base. I'd probably do the same in Saskatchewan around the same time. And I might even do some small group stuff on debrief. I would go around and get a sense of what are the top two things that you can show that you have appropriately gotten the right message or pivoted, quote unquote, which was the knock on him through the campaign. So I would do that, and then I would do those things. So if that's firing Jenny and tossing her overboard, then that's what it is. Or other things that, ways to humanize him, or taking a run at Trump, or if, the polling data and the debrief shows it, taking it really depends on what the polling shows, right? Like, do people want him to take a run at the further right? Do people want him to dig in on the further right? And that's what your debrief, your conversations, and some of your polling is going to tell you. And then I would look like I'm taking action in September, October, whatever that looks like, and going to the House, having done some things that have turned the page and I'm a new guy now. And I'm sure that'll mean throwing Jenny overboard in some way, because it doesn't seem like she has a whole lot of allies anywhere in the operation. And whatever else the data shows that you need to do. I would certainly be making a lot of those individual phone calls, though. There's no substitute for that in your caucus and listening to your caucus.
Carter, I want to pick up on that point because I agree with Shannon. I think we've said it many times on this podcast that there is no substitute to that exercise of the individualized phone call. However, tell me if I'm wrong about this, that on the heels of a loss, there could be this element that it showcases vulnerability and potentially even weakness, especially with the other side that I'm getting you to run, which is the expectation side, which is it can show humbling, it can show genuine curiosity, it can show all the things that it does, which is those calls, but it can also show weakness. Am I wrong in suggesting that that could be a greater force here than all the other upside that comes with that individualized phone call?
Well, I think that an individual phone call works wonders, but it works less well if another person calls you right afterwards. If Doug Ford was to pick up the phone and start doing his own individual calls and say, "Did you hear from the leader? He must be desperate." Or were you satisfied with his responses? Like if Doug Ford was working the telephones, or Jason Kenney was working the telephones against him, then your initial telephone call is kind of met on the field of battle and has less in terms of actual impact. This will be interesting to see if Doug Ford, Jason Kenney, and the like decide that they're going to try and do an open opposition to Pierre Poilievre. Sorry, I had a little stutter there. Couldn't spit out the word Pierre Poilievre. Very embarrassing. Very embarrassing.
I know it's historically been a struggle for you, Carter.
Yeah.
Final thoughts on this? Yeah, give me final thoughts on this from the perspective of Pierre Poilievre. Anything you would add to what Shannon's list is? And Shannon, I'm going to get you to do the vice versa for a second. Anything you would add to further chaos to the anti-Poilievre universe that we're trying to create, so that he potentially loses the job? Carter, first word to you, and then Shannon, I'll finish off with you on this.
Well, I would imagine one of the things I'd probably do is pull out the digital advertising budget and make sure that a lot of digital ads are being placed with a lot of video. The truth of the matter is that I think the Conservatives are coming out of the election in the strongest financial shape. No sense leaving that for the next leader. You may as well just piss it all away. So,
Yep.
You've got the fall to really ramp up your digital advertising on the party's dime. You may as well do that and really target your own members.
Shannon, I see you nodding and agreeing to that. I'll ask you the question on Carter's lane, which is anything you would do to disadvantage Poilievre this summer season between now and, let's say, obviously the by-election, but even extending into January.
Oh, I'd be coming at him from the right. As much and as often as I could, because that's where the vulnerability is. It's not coming from Doug Ford. Doug Ford is happy being mayor of Ontario until they take him out of there in a pine box, right? Like, he's not going anywhere. The challenge to Pierre Poilievre is not coming from the center right. It's not coming from the Chamber of Commerce.
That's what we're used to in Alberta. Yeah.
It's coming from the Lulus on the right. And so, I would be finding one or two of those to just start like creating just an absolute gong show. But Carter's right that they've got more money than really anyone. And, Pierre Poilievre could really, and probably should, shore himself up with the membership on digital ad. And he might have to if somebody comes at him from the right.
Can I ask you guys this, and this is leaning into the provincial side a bit more, but do you feel like the current situation we have with separatism in Alberta, could that metastasize to an operation on the federal level in any meaningful way? We've always talked about it metastasizing into a splinter of the right provincially, but I'm curious what role and impact, especially now that we're tripling down in Alberta, right? Like Poilievre's running in an Alberta seat. This is going to be an Alberta convention in January. You're probably calling a lot of Alberta ridings. Do you see the separatism force metastasizing at all federally, not just provincially? Anyone want to take that first?
Well, it very well could. I mean, we will recall that was the Reform Party, essentially. When we essentially had two big brokerage parties, and the New Democrats were kind of sidelined after the 88, and certainly after in the 93, that was when a bunch of Reform Partiers took seats from the New Democrats, right? And so we've seen some of this movie before in terms of when the two, the blue and the red become really big tent brokerage parties. There are factions that get left out, and that's what led to the creation of the Reform Party. Now, the issue with Poilievre is that his Alberta caucus and it certainly is Saskatchewan and that kind of caucus, they're very, very docile, right? There's not a whole lot of people storming their barricades among those that membership. There might be Keenan Bexty's father is now Bow River member of parliament. There's some
Yeah.
elements that might, bubble up there. But historically, the Alberta caucus in particular is pretty somnolent, put it that way.
Carter,
I
we're
gotta
recording
look
here
that up.
Monday.
Yeah.
It's good. That's good. Also the episode title. That's
Okay.
good. Yeah. We're going to give it all 3 spellings that you think it is. So go ahead.
Yeah, I
Give us the
can't.
3
I have
spellings
no
of that word.
idea. I have no
I
idea. It
am the
starts
brown
with an
person
S, I
administering a
think.
spelling bee. It's
Yeah.
good. I should be able to spell it. My people should be able to spell it.
Your
We
people
can't.
should, but we have no expectations from you.
This is true. Very true.
Yeah.
Carter, let's talk about the G7. We record here on Monday afternoon.
Uh-huh.
Carney's at the G7. He had a bilateral with Trump this morning. A lot of other fucking people showed up. I'm going to read you a quote. While conceding he's a tariffs person who likes the relative simplicity of imposing broad-based tariffs on goods from other countries to raise revenue and try to bring back jobs to the U.S., Trump said Carney has come forward with a different concept, and it's one some people like, and we're going to see if we can get to the bottom of it today. Quote, I think Mark has a more complex idea, but it's still very good, unquote, Trump said of some sort of trade pitch that Carney has made to the Americans, a proposal that is yet to be made public. I think we're going to accomplish a lot, quote unquote, from Trump at the end there. Carter, expectations were high. It wasn't that just Carney just wanted to host the G7. That was what was given to him. It seems like he wanted to now convene the G7 and be something at the G7. Talk to me about where we're at. We're obviously reacting to this in real time, but that quote is fascinating to me, which is why I pulled it out, which is Trump praising an alternative proposal by Carney at the G7 with a lot of observer countries or whatever you'd call them added to the mix. What do you think's happening to the expectations game in real time of one Mr. Mark Carney, Prime Minister of Canada?
I have said from the beginning that Mark Carney has a better relationship with Donald Trump because Mark Carney comes from the same class, if you will, self-made man, made millions of dollars, from Northwest Territories, who comes out and gets a scholarship to Harvard and suddenly makes all the money. I think that Trump has respect for people with money in a way that he doesn't have respect for other levels of politicians. So I think that Mark Carney coming in and saying, "I may not be a billionaire, but a hundred millionaire," that brings a lot of credibility to the table, and Mark Carney is taking advantage of that credibility. I would love to be able to see what the proposals are, because those proposals, I think that Donald Trump's proposals have been written on the back of a napkin in crayon. And I'm quite certain that Mark Carney's are probably a lot more like stained glass that you color in paint by number, because he needs to communicate with Donald Trump and make sure that Donald Trump actually understands what is the proposal that's being made and feels like it's akin or relationship or close to the proposal that he's made. I would love to be able to see it. I'm very impressed with how Mark Carney's managing the G7 overall. And I think that this is going to be an absolute highlight, whether it actually translates to the voters or not. But I think that this is, for the watchers, this has been amazing to this point. Here we are halfway through day one, but still very, very impressive.
It is interesting, and I'm going to ask you the same question, Shannon. What has this done to the expectations game? And I'll tag on the answer Carter gave me that I didn't ask, which is, what are you now thinking of Mark Carney as you sit here halfway through, a little bit more than halfway through day one of the G7 in Kananaskis?
Well, I mean, quite frankly, I don't know yet. This is like taking a toddler to the grocery store, right? Like you're halfway through. Is it going well? Yeah, okay, it is so far. But, the full-blown meltdown could still happen in the middle of the chip aisle. You never know. And so I don't think that we should get ahead of ourselves here. Like, he's doing his best. And clearly what's happening on the tariff side is he has put something before Trump that weaves in some of the national security stuff, some of the defense spending stuff, and uses that as leverage or a trade-off against baking in an ongoing tariff, because we know that that's Trump's bias. So he's already done it with the UK, and he's trying to do it with the whole world. And he's essentially said this morning, everyone has our deal, right? Because we'll just write them a letter and tell them that here's your across-the-board tariff for the rest of time. That's the trade deal if you don't make a deal with us, right? And so we know that's the default. And so what Carney is doing is putting something in front of him that does not bake in an across the board or even auto or steel specific tariff for the rest of time in a way that really rewrites the terms of CUSMA. That is what he is without having seen anything, that's what he's trying to do. And I don't think they could get it over the line for the G7 because there was too much in there that baked in a fundamental rewrite of our access to markets for us. And so now we're going to go into this place where he's just trying to leverage the defense stuff and some of the procurement, maybe some of that against, if we do this, then you will not tariff us on that is my hunch. That's what my gut of where this is going. And he's playing it out beautifully so far. And I have read some reporting that, they tried to structure it in a way that would make the toddler happy as well. Right. So in smaller chunks of time, because he doesn't like everyone going around the horn, 7 people. He doesn't like having to sit through a lot of that because it annoys him. So they've structured even today in a way that doesn't make him too tired. He gets his nap, his blankie, his snack, and they can kind of manage any meltdowns that might happen. It really does put me in mind of back in the day, managing 2 little boys in the grocery store.
I think it's a very fascinating analogy, and I think probably an apt one. Carter, here's the thing. Raw politics here. A better, more perfect deal end of summer, or a good enough deal today at the G7, today, tomorrow, right? Which would you take as someone advising Carney for the domestic political implications? Good enough deal this week, mic drop, or would you take a better deal, more negotiation, more hand-wringing over the summer down the road? I know you've talked about that he probably has the summer, should he need it. But I'm curious where we sit now and the pieces we see on the board, what you as a practitioner would take, as a strategist would take today.
Good enough today. Good enough right now. Today, tomorrow, the next day. And the reason is, I'm not sure. We just don't know what the mercurial waves of the toddler are going to be. I'm loving Shannon's analogy. He is a toddler. He is currently thinking that Mark Carney is a good guy that he wants to negotiate with. That could change.
He
Mark
said
Carney
that. It's
could
pretty
be
much
the
in his quote and in multiple quotes.
Yeah,
Yep.
but Mark Carney could become the devil incarnate by the end of August. Your best bet is to take what you can get early, as long as it's acceptable to the Canadian people. And I suspect that Mark Carney will be able to find a way to make it acceptable to the Canadian people. But it is it's a crapshoot if you go any longer. And it's a crapshoot if you go past today. Every day is a crapshoot with Donald Trump. Shannon's not wrong. You've got the toddler in the grocery store. How's it going to end? Who the hell knows? Generally speaking, the breakdown happens somewhere in the treat aisle. So we're probably at the treat aisle right about now.
Shannon, would you take good enough today? The Starmer has actually taken good enough yesterday, and he's paying a bit of a political consequence. So I am curious, there is the home field advantage of the G7. There's the current political moment. This would certainly be a mic drop of being able to convene, host, and do all those things. But there's the political ramifications of down the line of what you've made your populace live with and how that kind of ultimately lands with people. Well, how would you be thinking about this?
I would be thinking of it purely in terms of what it means for the Canadian economy and what it means for unemployment in the industrial base of the country. So I would take the risk of later because we know Taco, right? We absolutely know that he can back down. He's probably stronger politically today than he is tomorrow, than he is the day after that, the day after that. So I would, the risks that Carter identifies are absolutely real, but I would not want to bake in an across the board tariff or some kind of forever situation on auto and steel and aluminum that moves too far outside the bounds of the Canada-U.S. Mexico agreement. I just wouldn't. He's too weak in the future. And we almost know that for sure, right? Politically,
he's
anyway.
Too crazy in the future. We do know that for sure. The craziness of the future is impossible to predict. Strength and weakness is all relative.
We're going to use that and move it on to our final segment, our over-under and our lightning round. Stephen Carter, as you know, regardless of time of day, we do this for you.
Thank you.
This segment is for you. Here's my question for you. First one, I'll ask Shannon in a moment. 24 hours until the G7's over, lack of a better term. I think it is actually 24 hours or so. Advice for Carney over the next 24 hours, what would they be?
Keep doing what you're doing. The photos are great. The imagery that's coming out of the G7 is exactly what it should be. Some modest inconvenience for Calgarians, but overall, I'd say that the G7 is functioning the way better than anybody would dream of. And coming to Calgary and doing it in the Kananaskis region looks fairly inspired right now. The photos that are coming out are absolutely wonderful.
Give me 1 sec on this, Shannon, before I come to you. Explain more to me about why it's looking so good. Like, is it just the photos? Because you mentioned that twice. So I want to dig into this a bit more. Like, what is giving you the keep doing what you're doing, Carney? Like, is it the reporting? Is it the photo? Like, give me the package, Carter. What are you buying at such great quantities that you're loving right now?
The one-on-one photographs, the stuff that's coming out, with Starmer taking photographs of the G7 site, the interactions with Donald Trump, the one-on-one nature of this this G7 to this point, the way that it looks like Mark Carney is everywhere talking to everyone all at once, that to me is really driving the agenda. And it's the photographic video intensive outcome of all of this. I'm not sure that the man sat down for 48 hours, but he doesn't need to. He just needs to get out and have as many meetings as humanly possible and have those photographs taken. And the Canadian people will be like, that looks pretty great. And the backdrop is phenomenal. It is one of the most beautiful places on earth, and it looks like one of the most beautiful places on earth.
I think that's such an important point, both the geography, but I also love your point about actually hosting. Hosting is not just providing the space for facilitation. We've seen any good house party, the host introduces people to one another, is the person who knows the guest list the best, is the person who can circulate, is the person that can make introductions. And I think to that point you just made, Carter, Carney seems to be doing quite well. Now, I might be overreaching, you and I might be overreaching, which is why we have Shannon. Shannon, advice you'd be giving to Carney over the next 24, what would they be?
Oh, I think they've played this pretty beautifully. Like, I guess we're all Carney pilled in some ways. But I'm finding a hard way to find fault with this, right? I mean, we'll see what comes out of the communique, and we'll see what happens in the next 24 hours on the Israel-Iran conflict, because it could just kind of pull the whole thing off in a different direction and even cause conflict in the attendees. It could possibly. But what he's done is he's recreated essentially the big countries of the G20 at the G7. He's provided some of those opportunities for Canada to look like a leader on the world stage. And despite the fact that when Trudeau became prime minister in 2015, the whole thing was Canada is back on the world stage. We were not necessarily, I think because of the defense piece, considered to be the player that even Australia is, with a smaller population. And for geopolitical reasons, Australia has become sort of more important on the world on the world stage, right? China and relationship with Southeast Asia and so on. And so watching that happen, going back to some of that, Pearson era kind of leadership, is something that I think a lot of Canadians, particularly the Canadians that elected Mark Carney because they were, old people, are really looking for, and he is giving them what they want there and what they voted for. So I don't think there necessarily needs to be a tariff deal as long as Trump is like saying like sort of nice mumbles like he already did. And some of the bilat stuff, that can go out and become headlines in their own right that don't even maybe have to do with Canadians. If the Aussies conclude some sort of deal with somebody, or, Brazil does some trade stuff, it kind of places us within to take our rightful place, I think, and as more of a player than we have been historically. And that is only a good thing, I think, as we go into some more turbulent global times.
Two more questions, Shannon. I'll start with you again on this one. Overrated or underrated the Carney commitment for the 2% on the NATO defense spending? What overrated or underrated in your mind? Of course, we're saying this with the still active and alive G7, which I've mentioned multiple times, but on its own, overrated or underrated?
Well, people don't really care. So, the polling data, the reason why Canada's never done it is because the polling data puts that pretty low.
And it's expensive, billions of dollars.
It's not just expensive. It will displace a lot of programs when Canadians go, oh, yes, we need to tighten our belts. We should displace programs. And then when it's the stuff that comes into their bank account, they get mad, right? Because I don't think people quite get, the extent to which that child tax benefit is a massive amount of money every month. And the seniors benefits are quite generous in this country compared to many other countries, indexed to inflation, all the rest of it. There's a bunch of different ways in which the government of Canada supports our daily lives. And then there's the health and social transfers on top of that supports our provinces. So the fiscal situation becomes extremely tight for something that people only theoretically actually want, right? So there are risks and downsides to doing this once you start cutting things like Employment Social Development Canada programs, once you start cutting Indigenous services or seniors benefits of various kinds, workforce development stuff of various kinds, even border or passport services, or you name it, the kind of stuff, CRA that the government of Canada does. I still think there are risks in doing it. He's made the commitments. I have no earthly idea how he's going to get $9 billion extra out the door this year.
Out the door, yeah.
I leave that to them.
Carter, overrated or underrated, the 2% commitment?
I think that it's underrated for the relationship with Trump. It's one of those things that Trump has demanded kind of as the minimum entry point to any negotiations. And we've met that minimum entry point now. And I think that is an important number that we'll be talking about. Donald Trump will certainly be impressed by it. Whether we actually get
and
$9
potentially
billion
take credit
more.
For.
Yeah. We may not. But we've committed to it. And
that's what
matters.
It's Carter.
That's all that matters. Yeah.
Final question. I'm going to start with you. Yes or no?
No.
By the end of tomorrow, do we have a Canada-U.S. trade deal?
No.
Shannon, by the end of tomorrow, G7 officially wrapping up. Do we have a trade deal?
The Canadians have briefed on background that probably not. So unless they're really trying to set expectations, I'd say no.
We're going to leave it there. That's a wrap on episode 1875 of The Strategist. My name is Zain Velji. With me, as always, Shannon Phillips, Stephen Carter, and we shall see you next time.